Hello, I'm Joe Fox. I work at the LA Times on the graphics team. And this is a much less serious project than the last one. So Kobe Bryant retired in April. He played for the Lakers for 20 years, which is a really long time for a basketball player. And during that time, he did a lot of things, and he took a lot of shots. And so we decided to just put them all into an interactive, except for two, which I'll get to later. So if you look back at Kobe's career, he played for 20 years. He scored 39,000 points if you include the playoffs. And he won 5 championships with the Lakers, which is, a pretty accomplished record. There's a lot of debate over whether Kobe was a great player or not, really because he didn't make a huge percentage of his shots. But he sure did take a lot. So we figured if we're going to visualize such a big topic, we should start with something small, which is just a shot. So when we turn to the data on the NBA's website, you've got all these different categories, games started, minutes played, field goals. But we just were looking at one column, which is field goal attempts. And this is just, to help narrow it down so that we're not trying to look at too much at once. So we go in, look at the data, and this data came straight from stats.nba.com. It's available there through an API that is completely undocumented, except for a couple brave people on GitHub who have gone through and tried to sort of lay out all the endpoints, but it's sort of just wading into the dark when you're trying to use this API. But we wrote a web scraper, pulled down all the data we needed, and those weren't all supposed to show up at once, but if you look in the background here, you can see up at the top on the left there is an example of what this data looks like. So it's in JSON format, and we're pulling something called shot chart detail. And what that includes is the location on the court of every shot in X and Y coordinates. So if we look at this data, there's so much here. You can see whether he made it or missed it, what kind of shot it was, and it's not just jump shot. This gets really, really specific, like driving two-handed reverse dunk. Like, it's that specific. It's insane. But, two-pointer, three-pointer, what area of the court it was on, and then if you go all the way over to the right there, you can see the X and Y coordinates, which is what we were really interested in. So we got all that data for all 20 years of his career and the playoffs for every year that he was in the playoffs. And we pulled it into Python and did some plots with it that you can't see behind this picture. But eventually we turned it into this print layout of all 30,000 of his shots. We color-coded them based on whether he made them or missed them, purple and yellow for the Lakers, of course. And my very talented colleague, Lorena, made this into a great print graphic that ran in the special section that we put out the day after Kobe's last game. Let's move on. So for the interactive version of it, which was my focus after that, we had to figure out how to get this to work on any browser you're going to look at it on, or any device you're going to look at it with. And the only solution that we could think of for rendering 30,000 points in a browser was to make it into a map. We do a lot of maps at the LA Times. It's one of the things that we enjoy doing. But this data is not really a map, right? It's just abstract X and Y locations on a basketball court. And actually, it's X and Y locations on 30 different basketball courts. But that doesn't really matter because there's still spatial data. So if we just pretend that they occurred somewhere in the real world rather than on some sort of basketball court, then we can make a map of them. So we used a great service called CartoDB, which will take all of your 30,000 points and render them into tiles and serve them as images so that your iPhone doesn't have to work on every single one of those points at once. So we took this plot from Matplotlib, and we assigned latitudes and longitudes to those x and y coordinates and put them on the map with the basketball hoop at Staples Center. It's really dense points there, but this is what we did. So we did make a mistake here, and if you're really into maps, you might be able to guess what that was. I don't think I have time to talk about it right now, but I will talk about it later. So we took these x and y coordinates, and we just pretended that they happened across Southern California. And so we put them onto a map, gave them all latitudes and longitudes, and put them into CartoDB, which then sent us back these tiles. I put the lines in there so you can get an idea of what that is, but square images that are rendered at different zoom levels so that instead of having 30,000 things to keep track of, your phone only has 6 things to keep track of. So that really was the main thing, is getting this data that is not actually geographical into a service that makes it geographical. So now that we've focused on something very narrow, which is just shots attempted, we needed to put some of the data back into it. So we took a broad subject, condensed it down to one thing, and we needed to add some more dimensions, like the driving reverse dunks or the turnaround fadeaway jumpers. So we put in some annotations. We looked at where his last shot was, where on the court he was, and we put in some annotations for that, or other interesting shots that he took. We actually had a little tour that pointed out some of the important shots throughout his career, so that you could get an idea of it very quickly, what you're looking at. And if you're really interested, you could actually go in and filter it even more. And I'm really happy about these filters because it was a way to get LA Times readers to make SQL queries, and they didn't even know it. So with these, you could filter for any dunk Kobe made against the Cavaliers in any season he played. And that, in the background, was turned into an SQL query that we sent to CartoDB. People didn't know that it was an SQL query, but it doesn't really matter. What it brought back was a sentence saying what that was, and it only showed those points. So it's just it was kind of a cool way to let people dive into this data set in a really intuitive way without needing to learn SQL. This used to be a GIF of the basketball hoop falling on this kid, which I thought was really funny. But the last thing to make sure of was that we were going to get this out on time, the day after Kobe's last game. So we knew the NBA API updated sometime after games, but we didn't know how quick it was. We were pretty sure it was about an hour, but just in case, we wanted to have a backup plan. And so we actually recorded all the shots while we were watching the game on TV, just on paper. We didn't end up needing this, luckily, but it was there just in case. We always want to have a backup plan. And if you're interested in this, you can go on the Data Desk GitHub, which is the LA Times Data Desk, and you can see some of the code there. There's an IPython notebook that has our scraper and some other code, and there's lots of information there about it. So thank you.